All right, hello everyone. I am here to give a recap from our professional development this month that had to hone in on unpacking vocabulary, a journey to word mastery. We took us a little vacation, took us a little trip, and we learned a lot in one impactful day of professional development. So hopefully, we can see these vocabulary strategies taken away and implemented into your classroom. This semester, our focus is on vocabulary as we have a primary focus on literacy across all content areas to push our students to move forward in literacy each and every day. So, how are we implementing those different reading and writing strategies into our classroom on a daily basis? This is here to support you. So, we're focusing on vocabulary because when we did close reading last semester, we noticed that it was a little disconnect between our students and understanding the vocabulary that was actually being used in the course. So, whether that be content specific or if it's just words that we see often in different class periods that have different meanings, it is our chance for us as teachers to be able to go back and to address those vocabulary terms. So, I'm just going to do a brief recap of everything that we discussed. And if you missed PD, this is good for you to be able to go back and look at. But if you were in PD and you just want a chance to refresh your brain from time to time, I am here for you to be able to do that with. All right, so our first strategy that we talked about yesterday was our picture passports. For our picture passports, this is going to be a visual representation of our vocabulary words. You can use picture passports to be like a Frayer model by dividing it up into four and having the word being the main piece. And then you can change the elements that are around it to best fit your students. So, what I want you to know about a picture passport, it helps students recognize and remember vocabulary. This could be something that you're presenting before the unit, or it can be something that you are using as a reference throughout the unit, or at the end of the unit, if you want students to go back and look at those vocabulary terms then. You also can use this to create your word walls, visuals around your classroom, and there's so many different ways to do it. So yesterday we actually did it in class. You chose a term, and then you use that term to do the different boxes based off of what it was asking you to do. Now, what you probably have noticed that everybody kind of did something different because depending on your content area, you might have to switch up some of these headings to best fit your student. So you took the passport, you have a word and definition, you make it student friendly for them to be able to remember. You have use a sentence in context. For my math teachers, we actually were able to give a word problem or how you would see this or something that represents the actual theme in itself. The image or symbol for them to remember. This could be an actual graph of it, or it could just be something that's going to be memorable for that student. Synonym, this could also be an anonym, or it could be a short, quick quote that's going to help them remember. So you can make this fit however you feel is best for your students. When you are delivering this, you could give every student an 8 by 10 sheet of paper. Everybody get their own specific word. Everybody gets it together. You go into a formative assessment. You check off to make sure they have the right definition and the elements around it. And now you take that and you put it on the bulletin board, and every student has submitted a word. So you have now a bulletin board or a word wall and a visual within your classroom. That's one way to do it. You can make it digital. You can always have a slideshow that they are able to go in, edit their slide. Maybe they have a particular term that they have to work on. Maybe they're working with a partner to get it done. They have that one slide. They create the vocabulary word, and now you have a way to put it in Google Classroom, and now they can reference this as a slideshow. So that's another way to do it. So remember that Frayer models are not just stuck to having the circle in the middle and four boxes around it. There's different ways that you can actually present this to your students. You can always change the elements to it, and always know who you have in your classroom. When I say who you have in your classroom, what are their learning styles? I sent out a bite-sized moment with your IEF about I think January last month, and in that I put a link to a learning styles quiz that you can do with your students. It probably take about 10 minutes of your time, so it's a great opener. Students can then share out what their learning styles are, and you can kind of document that. You want to know you are teaching, because that's the best way that they learn. So if you have visual students in here in your classroom, always be sure to implement some type of visual piece to your lesson planning. If you have auditory students and you know that, well, they just need to hear it and they retain it, find ways to spark that learning interest. Maybe they enjoy reading aloud. Maybe that's something that they're really interested, that they don't have a problem with doing. So allow them to be that reader, allow them to build that fluency, and then you'll start seeing that other students will also dive in and try as well. So just remember that there's different ways that you can do this and present it, but know your learners to know how you want to change it to best fit your class. It's a visual aid. It helps with vocabulary retention. And you can do this differently for each level and each subject. So just some key takeaways. Our next essential in our vocabulary suitcase that we had for PD was our context clue compass. And like any type of compass, you need to know your direction. Well, the biggest thing about context clues is that you have to find something and then be able to figure out how you got to that point, right? And so you become a word detective. You want to find that unfamiliar, what are the unfamiliar words and what is the meaning of this word without having to look it up, but to be able to do it within the text that you're actually reading or the context that you're actually reading. It's different types of context clues that you can find. You can be looking for definitions. You can be looking for examples. You can be looking for a synonym, an anonym, making an inference. There's different ways that you can look for context clues. And we tried an actual activity called Lost in Translation, where students would guess the word meanings off of varied context based off of what they see. And so when we went into doing this together, the example was here. We had the word volume. You can read the different ways that volume is used in different subject areas. And think about possibly how a student goes from one class to another core class in the same day and might see the same word, but they might not know that it's two different meanings to it. So sometimes we tend to skip over some of those words that we assume students know that it has multiple meanings, but we can't assume. We have to take the time to actually know. And you probably have a couple of content related words that have multiple meanings that you probably just need to circle for yourself to make sure that students understand that they are different depending on which one you're looking at. And so we took a chance. We did our 3 read strategy with our Lost in Translation. I had everyone read alone. And then I had somebody read reading 1 and reading 2. Then we defined what word in each reading was the same, but it had different meanings. And then from there, we decided what the context clues were by underlining how we got to those definitions. So that is something that you can do within your classroom, and I highly encourage, because students can find more, or you might assume that they are going to look for something and they might find something else. So it's always a learning moment there for that. All right, so when you are doing context clues and when you're teaching context clues, here are some questions that you want to keep in mind when you're doing this with students. Knowing the process and what clues they found to get the definition or meaning of a word is going to tell you their thinking process, which helps you know how to move forward. Maybe it's a misconception there that you can address. Maybe they actually got it done perfectly. And it's like, okay, this is a word that I don't really have to come back to because I see that my students thoroughly understand it. It also helps you understand that words have multiple meanings and different understandings, especially depending on the student that you are teaching. They're going to always they're going to be familiar with their schema. They're going to be familiar with what they already know. And so allow them to use what their interest is to be able to help articulate whatever it is in your subject area. And last but not least, start thinking about some of those content related words that have multiple meanings so that you can start diving into those vocabulary terms. Our last essential on our trip was the interactive word excursions, and this is where we had to get that TPT going on, that total participation strategies that we need to be using. We got to get them up, we got to get them moving. It's so many different ways that you can include vocabulary, but make it fun, make them get up, make them move. And I know sometimes our classes are packed, I get it, but we got to expect them to have some type of kinetic, they gotta have the energy, they gotta get up. Okay, so some things that you can think about is like the vocabulary scavenger hunt. Maybe you put do the backwards design, you give everybody some definitions, give each student a different definition. You have words around the room, they have to go and find those words based off the definition without using any technology, and then they have to present and see if they matched everything correctly. So there's different ways that you can do a vocabulary scavenger hunt. Maybe one vocabulary term leads into the next one, leads into the next one. And yes, it's going to take some planning to do, but if we're not planning intentionally, we're not planning with our students in mind. So be sure to look at that first. Then you also can do vocabulary games like word charades, speed dating. Shout out to Miss Gilner, who did speed dating in her science class. So if you have an idea about that, you can look out for her, and she will be the one that can help you kind of plan and look at how you can do that in your classroom. Vocabulary relays is also another good tool. And last but not least, those digital tools, because our students love technology, and either we are going to get with it or not, but we're going to have to get with it. So you have areas like Quizlet, Kahoot, Flipgrid, for vocabulary practice. These are ways to give them some pre-work. As teachers, we're required to have pre-work, but as students, they should have some pre-work. Maybe front load those vocabularies, give them something digital to go home and do maybe for 10 minutes to 15 minutes a day. And then when they come into class, they're already familiar with some of the things that you're going to mention in your lecture because they had a chance to look at those vocabulary terms ahead of time. So give them something they can do. Quizlet is really good because it's already in form of flashcards. So they can go and flip back and forth. It can turn it into a test. You can do it aloud with you can do Quizlet live with your class. Different modes and ways that you can actually play the game. So keep that in mind when you might need a closer for the day. Quizlet is one that you can definitely use for vocabulary. So then we got up and tried it, and yes, we had some good debates about these good old educational words that some of us probably haven't seen in a very long time, and that is okay, but they are still very relevant to what we do every day as teachers. So just know that in your interactive word games, you can make these on PowerPoint, so you can make your own. You can have some, you already have some that are actually out there that you can use, platforms that can put them in the mode of like a Jeopardy game or a Family Feud. So just think about separating your classroom and actually physically getting them to cheer each other on, tag the next partner, all that good stuff. And yes, please make sure all your directions are said aloud because we have some competitive spirits everywhere. So you want to make sure that everything is clear and everybody knows what's going on. So keep that in mind. But add all three of these to your suitcase: the picture passports, the context clue compass, and the interactive word excursions, because this is going to give a chance for students to really indulge into the great things about vocabulary. Vocabulary should not be sit and get. Sometimes we do give them some vocabulary ahead of time, but how are we going to take that and use that throughout the lesson? So are they going back to use it as a reference? Does it have a visual element to it? Are we using our classroom as our learning tool? Because these posters and things that go up in your classroom can be student created, and they can be moments for reference for students to go and look at the board and say, hey, you know what? I remember that term because I drew the picture. So just think about different ways that you can do it. And last but not least, I want to give a shout out to two teachers. We had some IEFs in the building that went around and looked for vocabulary strategies in particular for a certain time period. And I want to give a shout out to Miss McLeod for her Tools for Success class with a vocabulary bingo, which was really cool. It was vocabulary terms they used throughout the week, and then she put them into bingo form, and they had to be able to decipher which one is which. And then Miss Jones with her vocabulary bookmark that she used while students were reading. They were also writing different vocabulary terms and adding to their bookmark so they can go back and look at. Both great strategies when you're looking at vocabulary. So if you want to see these superstars, please just go by and connect with your fellow colleagues here at DHS. I did say last but not least, but this is definitely a moment. Instructional reminders, like always, lesson plans are due by Thursday at 5 p.m. Your administrator will send different comments. Don't forget to clock in and out because that's how our time is checked. Remember that your instructional focus period is instruction towards re-engagement or enrichment. We tend to do a lot of re-engagement because we're looking at all of our students, but we tend to hone in on those students that are lower performing, but also think about those students that are higher performing and that you possibly could move on to something new. Think about your vertical alignment. What is the next course that they're going to be taking, and what is something that you can give them that will be beneficial to them as they move up in different coursework. And last but not least, if you ever need my help, please let me know. You can look at my email. It says book me at the bottom in my signature, and that will tell you what my schedule is and where I might be, so you'll know a good time to come and see me. And if it's anything else that you need, let me know. I'm here to support you in everything instructional and more. So have a great day and stop by 224 if you want a photo op. If you missed it, we had a great time in PD, and thank you for being great participants. So much, touchdown. Happy Friday Eve. All right. Bye bye.